Venom Fang X, given that what he defended was completely insane, had to be adept at psychological manipulation, and it was his skills in this regard from which the most can be gleaned. One thing he noticed was that when you start getting into bigness, people's minds turn to mush. People don't reason well once you start talking about big things. He was talking about how evolution seems plausible to a lot of people because such large amounts of time are involved. An example of this principle being used to political ends was when Barack Obama cut $100 million from the federal budget. This principle explains why the argument that a state becomes necessary once a group of people reach a certain size has a superficial plausibility. For example, medieval Iceland had a population of only around 80,000 in 1200 AD. The western United States had populations of around 60,000 by the time they became states. But medieval Ireland had a population ranging from 500,000 to roughly 1.5 million between 650 and 1650 AD. And the analysis of both Ireland and Iceland is practically identical. If one analyzed the institutions of Ireland and Iceland without having the populations of both places stated beforehand, one would have no way of knowing which was larger. Though perhaps it's not population per se, but population density. For example, the mining towns in the Old West, while surrounded by wilderness, were extremely dense, so couldn't possibly function without some sort of state to settle disputes. Oh wait, they did. And while certainly rowdy and rough places filled with rowdy and rough men, they were actually quite civilized in matters of dispute resolution. Hell, if population density is the criteria for needing a state, then how the hell do ships that enter international waters possibly function? Sure, there is some sea law, but if the crew mutinied and killed the captain and seized the cargo, then they could surely make up some sort of story once they got onto land. But of course ships don't carry millions of people. The largest cruise liners carry a few thousand. So really, the state is necessary for when a population reaches, say, 1 million in a large city like New York City. Statelessness can work and even be demonstrated to work on a small scale, and even the impersonal scale. And the impersonal scale, I mean, once you get to around 1,000 people. The society is too large for each person to know each other person individually, and so interpersonal regulations aren't in play. But once you get way bigger than 1,000, then a state is necessary because what I think is happening is that humanity tends towards statism. This is a self-evident fact. It's a sad fact, but it is a self-evident fact. Stateless societies are oddballs that formed in unique circumstances, and as oddball societies, they tend to be on the fringes. These areas, Ireland, Iceland, the western U.S., parts of Siberia, which were out of reach of the dead hand of the state, tended to have low population densities. And so the statist who views the state as arising from necessity makes a faulty connection and proclaims the state as necessary for high population density. And this connection is strengthened by what Venom Fang X described. That is, people have a hard time thinking straight when big numbers are involved. Or more precisely, as the system becomes more and more complex, it becomes more and more difficult to describe. And as the system, like New York City, becomes fantastically complex, individuals need an order that they can understand. They can't understand the emergent order any more than a single cell can understand the entire body. The state provides them with something they do understand. There's a gap, and instead of recognizing that they will never be able to fully understand New York City, and at best will come up with a Platonic ideal of New York City with various principles perfectly and unitarily expressed, they demand the state of the gaps. And when you ask them to apply the principles of the state, democracy, imprisonment, the against me argument, would you pull the trigger on me, to their own personal lives, it is self-evidently absurd and rather barbaric. But when dealing with big populations, of course you need a state.